Hey everyone, video 2. Flowing out of historical analysis comes the second theme that I identify in this course as being of importance to myself, and that is forecasting technological developments and trends. So we left off the last video by discussing Chandler, who warned us against being centrist, too centric. So being too technocentric, but also being too logocentric and a few others. The second thing that Chandler warns us against is technological determinism. So why am I bringing these two things up again? And since we discussed the last episode, well, in this episode, I'm talking about forecasting, and forecasting, that is futuring, thinking about the future. A lot of where you get your analysis from is how you understand the past. So if you're using technological determinism to identify trends in history, you're going to do that going forward as well. If you're overly focused on technology in the past, so you're technocentric, then going forward, you're going to predict, you're going to forecast in a technocentric way, which you will be neglecting broader contextual considerations. And this will have an impact on how you forecast. So I've identified 3 main groupings of writers from the course, resources. The first grouping is very technologically centered, technological determinists. They tick all the boxes for what Chandler warns us against. So they see any kind of human problem as being able to be resolved by technology. And in addition, these people are very focused on the individual, focused on rationality. So it just makes sense to do things this way. Why don't we just do it this way? And in addition to all this, I think this is the group that would really get under the skin of Postman, who in Technopoly talks about individuals who are enraptured to technology, who deify it, who see it as the be-all and end-all of human progress. And the authors that fall under this category are Bush, Engelbart, and Nelson, and Kevin Kelly. Okay, so where this first technologically centered group was correct in their forecast was in this sort of broad stroke forecast of where the technology itself would go, but not in how the technology would be used by people, not its impacts on wider society. So for instance, with Google Books, we had a forecast by Kevin Kelly, which said that Google Books would really revolutionize the sharing of information. And what we see from the world today is that actually the more cautious forecast by more context conscious speakers in the CBC radio podcast, they were relevant to this situation. So when Google, a big tech giant, is controlling access to this library, you're gonna have a bad time. Not everyone's gonna have access to it. The second group was not technologically centered, but it was still centered. This group was centered on literature and reading per se, not technology. So for them, their forecasts had to do with where literature was going. So with Barth, he argued that the novel literature itself had become exhausted and that we need to explore new potentialities. With Bolter, we have in some way perhaps a response to that, saying literature will change because of the affordances of hypertext, so we can have a more interactive kind of book form. In terms of how correct they were in their forecasts, I think that history has proven both of them wrong. And this point is arguable, but I will put out there that books in the novel form have proliferated. And although ebooks have also been proliferating, this does not support Bolter's theory because ebooks themselves follow the traditional format. They aren't hypertext, choose your own adventure style books. And I think a lot of that has to do with basic psychology, like why do people read, why do people write books, what do people expect from a book? Is it really to interact with the story and to control it? Is it something else? These are things that weren't considered by Boulter or by Barth. So first we had technology-centered, then we have literature-centered, and now we have education-centered forecasts about the future. The biggest difference with the educational-centered focus, perhaps because of the nature of education, is that these writers were quite focused on the broader context in which technologies are developed and employed. So they consider things such as individual psychology, they consider and they were much more focused on, in their forecasts, what would happen in the world and how would we as people, as human beings, and as educators respond to them. Walensky's forecasts that the internet may be able to be used as a way to kind of share and broaden public discourse to become a healthy ingredient to democracy. It wasn't able to predict the rise of echo chambers in search algorithms or social media, and it wasn't able to predict the rise of so-called fake news. Now, I think that what could have aided in making for a more robust kind of forecast for Walensky would have been an even fuller analysis of the context. So maybe reading someone like Chomsky, he could have realized that mainstream news monopolies, geopolitics, and good old-fashioned state-sponsored propaganda were all part and parcel of the world that he was describing. As for the New London Group and Cope and Calantzas, the forecasted need of actively addressing the world's problems is very pertinent to the world today. It's become more pertinent, as Cope and Calantzas point out. And I think it's re-emphasized by the challenges to Walensky's forecasts. So the problem of echo chambers and the problem of false news. These authors said, okay, look, here are these structures in the world, and here are our students. What can we do to benefit our students such that they both understand the world and are equipped to change the world for the better? Because if we don't do that, the world's going to continue on in this messy, kind of horrible way. So these authors all said, look, here's the world the way it is. It's very messy. There's a lot of problems in it. Technology on its own is not going to be able to put a dent in any of those. And here are our students. They're living in this world. How can we equip them to understand this world better so that they can change the world for the better? And well, the trends they outline continue, and it's true. Technology hasn't changed anything. We are in need of active change of this situation as human beings. So there you have my second theme, forecasting. You have three groups. You have technologically centered, you have literature and reading centered, and then you have education centered. And I think in terms of the centering, it really impacted how they were able to forecast, what they were able to forecast, and I think that's quite important to know.